Hello, everyone. Greetings from Washington, D.C. area. I'm Anna Uspinskaya, and I'd like to invite Katie Beardsworth to join me. She's a creator of Music Works, a wonderful series of podcasts, which we worked together on creating. And it's a great pleasure to have you, Katie, back. Welcome.
Thank you. Great pleasure to be back always.
Yeah, I love those Mondays and Thursdays mornings. They're not mornings for you, I get it. But for me, this is a good way to start the day.
Nice lunchtime for me.
Yeah. So today's episode is number 13, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And it's a very interesting one with a couple of guests. Katie, would you please introduce what, just give us a little scope of the episode, what's it about?
Sure. This is called Stepping into Your Arts Career, and I interviewed two fantastic people for this episode. It was such a great conversation. So Anna Kent is a recent music graduate from the University of Hull, and she now works for the Britten Sinfonia, having secured that job in May, I think, so in lockdown. So, and the other guest is Rebecca Milford, who is a singer at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama in London, and she finished her undergraduate degree this summer just gone. So again, finished her degree in lockdown and has just started her master's degree at Guildhall as well. So it was sort of bringing the graduate and kind of current student perspective. So the point of getting these two guests together was to talk about the impact that this is having on people who are studying, graduating, commencing their career in the arts at a time when the arts feels really shaky as an industry, obviously because of not being able to hold live events, which is such an enormous part of the industry and of the work that's involved in it. So, I mean, I won't preempt the episode, but I found it a really, really interesting and enlightening conversation, and some of the things that they had to say about the kind of, I mean, like Rebecca was talking about the way that she's used her network of peers as a support network during lockdown, and it sounded like such a supportive and wonderful experience and really kind of shaping in terms of, I feel like that her experience there will go through her career with her. In terms of
Absolutely.
yeah,
I'm sure the current situation is shaping the new generation of musicians and their approach to the career and networking and seeking the support groups in a way somewhat different, because there's so many things which we took for granted and they suddenly became unavailable, and 10 months, a year is a very long time in someone's life who's in the stages of developing their networks and career, and in between the degrees. And I'm sure a lot of young musicians are seriously considering, am I entering the right field? And it's all great and wonderful to be talking about love for music. We all have it, granted. But the practical aspect of it, of being able to have a successful career and sustain the family and have a practical prospect of a good life is extremely important. So it's wonderful that the young people are sharing their solutions and their views of how they can be successful and thrive in that industry when it's so vulnerable to something like this.
I really agree, and I think if there was one thing I really hope will come out of the mess that has been the pandemic and the response to it, is that people are more empowered to advocate for the careers that they want, and this could apply to any industry, but I think that young people coming into the arts now have the power to really change the space in terms of what's expected of people, and how rewarding it is to work in it, because the pandemic, as I've said many times, just highlighted a load of problems that already existed within the industry, and it's now clear that not only do they make it not work well for a lot of people who are in it, it also means that if there is a problem like this pandemic, the whole thing becomes untenable extremely quickly. And I think that
Absolutely.
young people have a lot of power in that sense, and I hope that I didn't know what Anna and Rebecca were going to say when they came on the podcast. I didn't know if they'd had a horrendous year or what, but they both spoke really positively with real kind of good takeaways for the future and a positive outlook for their arts careers. So if anybody is in the position of having this kind of these worries and which would
second
be completely
thoughts.
understandable. Exactly, I would urge you to listen because it's really nice to hear these perspectives. And I don't think that they're unique, although they are both exceptional women. I don't think that it's just happening to them. I think this is a way that we could all be going.
Yeah, and I'd like to highlight one point you just made, which is young people entering the industry have not only the opportunity but tremendous power to shape how it's going to work after pandemic, and have a potential of being able to resolve a lot of old nagging problems in the industry, which were screaming for being addressed. And now, hopefully, young people will step in and address them. Well, not to say that people of our age cannot do anything about it. We should be doing some things about it too. But the fresh influx of young energy and who had gone through this pandemic experience at the shaping age is going to really open new horizons. I believe in that.
I believe in that too. I think a lot of the behaviour that we develop as arts professionals to do with taking work for less money than we should and so on is often kind of created at that critical, just finishing studying, entering into the profession stage, because we obviously naturally feel as though we need to prove our worth or, earn our crust within the industry to an extent. And I think that a generation of music professionals going into the industry with the right mindset and a clear idea of what happens if you undervalue yourself going forward can really help, because obviously once we get further into our music careers, even if we want to bring about change, we have a lot of pre-existing relationships that we need to maintain. We have a status quo, we have a mortgage potentially, or a family to sustain, and it is it's a lot more difficult to bring about change from the middle of a career, even though I still do think that we should encourage that as is possible. Ultimately we all have to do the things that are going to help us personally and hopefully help our profession as well.
Thank you, Katie, for bringing wonderful guests, for raising these topics. It's extremely helpful, and I appreciate the work you're doing very, very much. And I hope the viewers get a chance to watch it, because the takeaways can be really instrumental in how they themselves approach the careers and their work.
Thank you, Anna. It was a pleasure.
Yes. And now to the episode.
Hello and welcome to Music Works, a podcast by Polyphony Arts. We're talking about the future of the classical music industry with some great guests. Thank you for joining us. Hello and welcome to Music Works. I'm Katie Beardsworth, and today with me I have Anna Kent and Rebecca Milford. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Welcome. Anna and Rebecca are young people in the arts, which is, I wish that I could still call myself a young person in the arts. I think I'm heading more towards the middle age, but it's certainly something that I resonate with. And what we're going to talk about today is in line with our idea of the future of, talking about the future of classical music. What that future looks like for people who are have just graduated or are just in the process of doing their studies. So Anna is a recent graduate of the University of Hull and now works for the Britten Sinfonia, and Rebecca is a current master's student at Guildhall School of Music and Drama. Would you like to introduce yourselves further, Anna?
Yeah, so as Katie said, I studied at Hull, graduated last summer, and that's actually where I first met Katie. We both did we bumped into each other quite a few times doing different bits around the area. And then I worked for a mental health charity, Mind, for 10 months after graduating. But I was desperate to get into something in the arts, and in May, at the very strangest time to start a new job, I started working for Britain Symphonia.
And Rebecca, tell us about what you're up to.
Yeah, so I just graduated from the Guildhall School of Music and Drama doing my undergraduate, a soprano, and continuing on with them very happily to do my master's, still studying with the same teacher, with John Evans. And alongside my studies, I'm also a vocal teacher. So I mainly work for New Music Hub. With them in the last kind of 18 months, I've done a lot of kind of vocal project work and outreach. So I'm looking to have both a kind of career as a soprano, but also use music to reach more young people and find ways to use it to break down barriers. So that's something I'm trying to develop alongside my singing at the moment, and still working with them.
Oh, how wonderful. Much needed.
um,
So my question, the big question really, I suppose, is what does the current situation with various stages of lockdown and so on mean for your future careers and for your studies? Just to dive straight in there, Rebecca, as obviously you're just embarking on a master's, how do you feel that impacts you at the moment?
it's a funny one because I can't speak for every instrument. I think singing is a very peculiar beast in terms of as a career path, because there is already a when you begin a career as a singer, an idea that there is like quite a long span of time where you're not necessarily an active participant in the career, but you're an active participant in the way that you study and the way that you learn to sing. So this the pandemic has actually, for me, come at a very lucky patch of my life. It came at a point where I was finishing 4 years of quite intensive conservatoire studying. It came in my fourth year of that, and has marked the beginning of my master's, when, whilst I'm definitely thinking now about, maybe taking more active steps towards doing more auditions and doing things that are more kind of I don't know, marking myself out as in a career. I haven't lost jobs as a singer. I haven't lost I maybe lost the idea of jobs that I didn't know were going to happen, but I've not lost like hard and fast jobs. Whereas I know singers who I think are further into their career, who there are singers in a particular part of their career where they're doing really well anyway, and it's just a pause and they're going to pick it back up again. And then there's like a group of singers that were just on the cusp of like getting out there, and like they just spent that time that I'm about to kind of enter, where they were making those contacts and really throwing themselves in, and they were, and that those are the people that I actually, I think at the moment this has affected quite intensely. For me, all it's given me is space to spend time with my loved ones, but also practice much more effectively and study much harder, and like let parts of my craft settle. But it's certainly, I think it's just so different for every type of young artist at the moment. I don't think there's one version of this, which is complicated.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I definitely agree with that. And it's great to hear that it has come at a positive time for you. And I think we're all aware that there are various sort of impacts on this depending on what career stage people are at. But certainly my view has been that it's been particularly difficult for people who are at transitional points in their lives and have had things kind of put on hold. And I'm glad to hear that there are transitional points at which this can have some benefits. So that's really good to hear. And what's it like did it affect were you always going to do a master's, or did it affect your decision to do a master's?
No, it didn't, because I auditioned for my master's in December of 2019, and you find out very quickly whether that's going to happen. So I found out around just a kind of a week or so before Christmas. And so that was already rolling. If it did anything at all, it just made me cling to the fact that I knew that like it was going to happen. So as we went into lockdown, I was like, and then as lockdown progressed, I realized that going back into a conservatoire I've been at for 4 years and have relationships with the staff and relationships with my peers, and don't have to go in search, like knowing what I'm going in for is very, very useful, because I'm actually able to perform at the moment. Even though it's only at Guildhall, I still weekly get to hear people sing or make music live, and I still get an opportunity to like do that because it's within a university structure. So if anything, it just made me more certain that the place was wanted. But I was pretty, I had accepted the place. So
Oh,
yeah.
that makes a lot of sense. And what was finishing your undergraduate studies at Guildhall like during lockdown?
It was, if I said that it was amazing and fantastic the entire time, then I would not be a human being, and I would not be truthful. It was a learning curve for every single person. I have to say that they jumped to action quicker than most anywhere I heard of. And I had peers from other universities that really struggled with that, of not feeling like they had contact with their university. Guildhall were really quick off the bat, and they put every project we had nearly online. So I did opera scenes online, and I did a contemporary voice project online, and I did everything online other than my end of year recital, which just got postponed until we were live in September. And do you know what? Like, the collaboration level on those opera scenes in particular was insane. It was, we were all, every single person on that project, and let alone the opera school that were doing like an entire opera online. It was like everyone learning to do something with their craft that they'd never even had to consider, like recording the Act One finale of Don Giovanni, when you have like one headphone in a bedroom and like a click track, and set up, and everything's like crazy, and like you're trying to send in recordings of yourself, and then it's not right, so you send another one, and then you get the track back, and then you like film yourself as if you're in a TV show or whatever, or a music video, mouthing to your own voice. So then when you're on stage, you never really get that level of detail about the way that you reflect on the way that you perform. And all of a sudden, I'm spending like 3 or 4 hours watching myself back, being like, why did I do that? Why did I make that face? Why did I do that? That was terrible. And I think all of us, all of my peers that did those opera scenes, went through so many emotions trying to sort it out. But actually, for me, I can't speak for them, but for me, it absolutely propelled my attention to detail, because I was just having to really be specific about what I was trying to achieve as an artist in those moments, and taking on responsibility for myself in a way that we all agreed with this actually when we came back. Zoom singing lessons are a thing that have now happened to us all for many months, and it's so strange, because your teacher can hear you and they might say, oh, that was good, and I could but try this, but they can't, it's not the same, so they can't quite gauge. And so you go into like full on survivor mode, really, and you have to adjust yourself way more as a singer or I did, than I had done live, because there's just so much else going on when you're in person with your teacher. So for me and a lot of my peers, it was like so many things that we'd been learning just kind of they just got propelled and moved, and it was a really humbling experience to take the 4 years I'd had and use everything that I'd learned in a way that I'd really not anticipated. But oh boy, when we came back, I was so excited to sing live. Like, I was just
I'm sure.
like hearing a piano play with me for the first time was just like, it was like chills kind of feeling in a rehearsal. Even, it was just, every part of me was happy. I was just like, yeah, okay.
That makes a lot of sense. It does sound as though needing to learn to do things online in that way, which obviously everyone has pretty much, whether they are studying or already in the professional world, has it sounds as though it's beneficial actually to have had the support of your conservatoire while you're learning that, because obviously people who are already out of that setting have to just do it. They don't necessarily have that support network. And I've heard other reports, I think, of the level of kind of self-criticism. I don't mean criticism in a negative way, but as in critical thinking, and attention to detail being accelerated a lot by that. So it's interesting. I wonder if we'll see that in, you know, the upcoming generations of artists, you know, that they've had that as part of their original, well, not original, you know what I mean, their training at
Yeah.
college.
I think from what happened, the Conservatoire themselves, yes, they were extremely supportive, but the people that really were the game changer for me in that whole experience were my peers. We lent on each other so deeply in that time. And I think I've been really lucky at Guildhall to have met some really kind and lovely young artists that I've worked with. But in that time, you really saw who it was that really does this because they love it. And it was really humbling because music, as much as I love doing certain things about music for myself, essentially it isn't really about me. And the times that it's the least about me, it's always the better version of what I'm doing. And I just think everybody that I worked with, we were able to just share what was tricky and like be frustrated at the same thing and be happy about the same thing. And you know, and whenever we watched each other's performances, we'd, you know, be texting each other and making sure everyone knew that we were all trying our best at a time when it was actually really, really difficult for all of us to feel like that. And we would have, like, I had a few friends where we would just be practicing and we'd just text each other and be like, oh, I'm really stuck, just like I haven't sung to anyone in ages, can I just FaceTime you? And we'd just FaceTime each other and sing and then be like, oh, that was so great, and give like no feedback, but just be like, you're so great, oh, I love this, it's like, this is fine. And I think without that, I don't know what I'd have done. And that makes me feel like the next generation of artists have been through a very humbling experience. And I feel like I'll never take for granted how much music is collaborative ever again. Like, I think I knew that anyway, but now all I want to do when I make music is be with as many people in the room as I can, because that's it, really.
That's what I've not had, so yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think the next generation I think they will be even more sensitive to what it is that everyone in the room has to offer. And there will be something really amazing about that. I think that could be game changing.
I agree. You put that really beautifully, actually. Thank you. And I mean, I worked at a festival this weekend for the first time. That's what I do, I organise festivals, and amongst other things. And we actually did a real one with 3D people, 3D musicians in a room, and it was absolutely incredible. We had 5 different events with 5 different audiences and 5 different setups and a whole lot of sanitizing in between. And the vibe in the room was just incredible because everyone was just so appreciative, and they always are, I think, but like, you know, there was just that sort of extra amazingness, and you know, many tears were shed, I think, definitely by me. So Anna, to come all the way back to the original question, tell us about things with you and the impact of this current time on your career, or how you see it.
I mean, quite similarly to Rebecca, I feel quite lucky that I feared the worst and it hasn't lived up to expectations in a bad way. It's been so much better than I could have imagined, and certainly got Britain Symphonia to thank for that. But also, I'd already worked from home for a month before I started my new job, so I'd already got into the swing of things. Rather than first day of the new job thinking, I don't know how Zoom works, I kind of got into the swing of that. But it was really strange because I was in Hull working for an orchestra in Cambridge that I hadn't, well, I've been to a concert of theirs maybe 8 years ago, but I'd not been to a recent concert. I'd been to their offices once for my interview. And then I was just working from home, and the first staff meeting I had, there were just 11 faces on a screen, and it was really bizarre. But as Rebecca was saying, I think we've surely got to take from this that it's equipped us with skills we never thought we would need or have. And however things progress, we know that we're able to adapt to new ways of working. I'm so pleased to say that I finally did move to Cambridge in the summer. I've got to spend some time before it's now dark after work in Cambridge, and it's a wonderful place to be. And there's loads going on even without many concerts. I managed to go to my first Britain Sinfonia concert in August, so 4 months in, which was also amazing. I definitely cried. I don't think everyone thought it was a momentous occasion, but no one realised how profoundly it would hit them until the music started. And we were just all sitting there like, whoa, I did not realise that was gonna... It's never felt like that before. It was really
so impactful about that, and I can only imagine, because I actually remember I worked for an orchestra about 10 years ago. That was my first proper arts admin job, and I remember going to the first rehearsal, because as you know, when you work for an orchestra, you spend like 80% of the time in the office, and then it's like, yay, musicians. And I went to the first rehearsal, and it was in a hall that was the right size to house the orchestra for rehearsal, but obviously with no kind of audience space. It was a rehearsal hall, so basically if you were in the hall, you were in the orchestra. And they just started, and I was doing something with like signage or name badges or something really admin-y, and it just kind of kicked off around me, and I literally inside was just like, whoa. Because it started with this, I can't remember what the piece was now, but it was like something really massive where everyone came in together, and I was like, this is so huge. And I remember thinking that at the time and being quite overwhelmed by it, and that was, not at a time when I'd been remotely deprived of music. So,
well, yeah, because you get tied up, you're sorting out comps for artists, you're sorting out name badges, and you don't forget why you're doing it, but you need those reminders of, oh, this is like, we are needed, because arts isn't the arts without arts administrators.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more there. And I really hear you about the weirdness of starting a new job and trying to kind of get into a new culture and a new company culture and so on without being able to be with them in person as well. That can be it can be quite difficult. Is it? But I mean, I suppose everyone was working remotely, were they, at the time?
Yeah, that's true. It's not like I was the only outsider there, which definitely helped. And as I said, because we'd all been doing it for a while, it wasn't. I was in a new job, and it was all really strange. I'd got used to the part of the strange side of things. I mean, everyone was great. It's just, it is bizarre if you've only ever seen people from the shoulders up. And you can't get into certain ways of how an organisation works until you've actually spent time with those people. And we are now doing that once a week, once a month, whatever. So I'm kind of gradually getting into that. But it was very much a different way of learning.
It is different, isn't it? And it's not necessarily worse. I mean, obviously, organisations that usually work in an office together all the time, if you come into that as a new role, then you are coming into something that already exists. But I mean, I feel from my personal experience, obviously I run a company from home anyway, so I'm so very much kind of in the home working way of thinking. But I think there are some really good things that people who are used to working in offices can learn from working from home, especially people sort of managing office-based teams to managing remote teams. I think that can be a really useful skill that people can pick up. Just kind of as an aside. So Anna, what do you think the main challenges are for working in a kind of arts admin, orchestra management type role remotely?
I think feeling part of it is obviously a problem, and getting the right tone of voice. So for example, say I'm managing Twitter, I need to know how we usually do things on Twitter, and I can't just say to my colleague sitting 2 meters to my right, do you think this is all right? How would you normally phrase it? Is this the kind of thing we'd normally retweet? And so there's particularly to start with, there was a lot of, I don't want to feel like, I don't want to be the one always asking questions, but at the same time, I have so many questions that aren't really worth a phone call, but also I'm not sitting next to that person, so I can't just ask them it. So it was kind of accepting that it was weird for everyone. It was weird for my team because it was the first time they'd had a new person start with them. They were having to show me how to use software over a screen, which was really bizarre. But as we keep saying, I just think we're going to come out of this so much better at so many things that we never thought we needed. And the world will develop in ways where those things will become useful, even if we don't think that Zoom is going to last forever. Things that we've learned how to do through that are going to be so useful to our working lives.
Yeah, I think we're going to be able to pick the bits that work better and combine them with the things that work better in person or in other ways, and kind of move into a whole new way. I know that travel, for instance, is going to be a lot less of, I think, certainly in my line of work, where I would often travel for meetings and things like that, and there doesn't really seem to be much to be gained in most cases, you know.
Well, you can be more productive then because you've got less time traveling, more time actually doing. Yeah, exactly. Which can't be a bad thing.
Yeah, definitely. On the other hand, I think you kind of miss that. I think that's that kind of the stuff that's not official, the stuff that's not on the agenda. I think that's missed, and I imagine that's probably quite felt in a new role as well, because it's that kind of over the coffee machine.
Absolutely, the things you learn over a cup of tea are often more useful than what you learn in a 1 hour meeting, and that's not being rude. That's just you just start talking about something, realize there's a connection, and it goes from there. I mean, loads of ideas are made that way. It is really important, and that is really hard to replicate virtually.
Yeah, it is quite difficult. It's not impossible. I mean, we do it in our team through kind of having accessible like Zoom calls, kind of, you know, you can sit with a Zoom window open and just let people just like ping in whenever. It's not usually quite as constant as that, but yeah, you sort of get more into that kind of, can we just hop on a quick call because I've got like a 30-second question that I might have asked over over a cuppa or whatever. But yeah, it definitely, there's no question that those things are missed, I think. Well, it's really lovely to hear two stories about you know, things that essentially careers that haven't been held back by this, and you know, because there's such a lot of doom and gloom stories out there, and I'm really happy that and I didn't necessarily know before you came on that that's what you were going to say, so I'm thrilled to hear that. Do you think, Anna, that what would you say about kind of finding arts admin jobs in general? Because obviously you've just come out of that post-uni. I think so many people do what you've done, where they get an initial job. I know I certainly did. That's kind of in the right ballpark, but not completely the forever thing. I did the same. I worked in a music shop for about a year before I got my job with the orchestra. Have you got any advice for people who are entering the job market, or, I don't know, thoughts on that?
I mean, firstly, I'd say, like, no job really is going to be bad experience. It's going to set you up well, and I do believe that the job that I'd had at mind is what set me apart from the other applicants in the Britain Sinfonia job that I now have, because I assumed the other applicants were all music graduates. So the different thing was that I'd done something outside of music, which seems a bit bizarre, but to have had kind of a different view in a similar industry, because it was fundraising and marketing, but nothing to do with music. And it was a job straight out of uni, so I hadn't spent 10 months not doing anything. I'd gone and got that job, and it wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do, but that certainly helps. Anything that's kind of vaguely related certainly helps. And I think it's also easier to apply for jobs when you've got a job, or not easier to apply, but I think people are going to look more favourably on you if you've got a job, even if it's not in the same area. But I think apart from that, I mean, I'm sure Rebecca will have some opinions on this as well, but making the most out of uni, because as soon as you leave uni, you realise how little time you have to do the things you didn't do at uni. Volunteering at anything, volunteering at concerts, going to concerts for free and absorbing all that music, absorbing how it works, talking to external people, networking all the time, even if you don't know you're doing it, like going to a concert and then speaking to the composer afterwards. even if you're shy, don't even speak to them, but send them a Twitter message and say, hey, I really enjoyed that. Could we have a chat over coffee if you're into composing? All these things that as soon as you're thrown into a different environment. So I was then in fundraising. My brain was kind of absorbed in this mind fundraising world. And so although I was able to carry on my ensembles, you have to make the most of the time that you have at uni to meet people, to make connections, and you never know where that's going to help you.
Yeah, that's excellent advice. Rebecca, what do you think?
Completely. I completely agree, whether that's, you know, saying yes to something that you're just like, oh, I don't know, or whether that's, you know, just, as you say, going and experiencing music just as a listener and an observer, which is, for me, the times when I've done that actively and been engaged are the times where so many like dots of I might not in the work I'm doing, or the lessons, or the practice kind of connect. I think that's something that I thought I wasn't taking for granted before COVID, and then I went into COVID and lockdown and pretty quickly realized that there were, I think generally I'm pretty engaged, I'm here and I'm ready, but there were certainly some things that I wasn't making the most of as a performer. And as a performer at a conservatoire, I think what I had done in particular that I didn't realize I was doing was not making the most of the fact that at a conservatoire where you're training, you can make mistakes and you won't lose work as a result of that. And it's not that I've been in a situation where that's happened, but when I went into lockdown, quite quickly I realized that I missed like performing in front of people, and I wanted to just do it because, and since I've been back, I've been trying to take more risks in performance in front of people, because actually when you start having a career, you're going to feel like this, you can still definitely take risks, but you're going to feel like the stakes are higher. So I think if someone's in a conservatoire, take that opportunity to just like kind of be off the wall with the way that you create music, and do things that scare you. And even if you do something and you go, never doing that again, that will inform so much of how you relate to your craft. And I think that's something that people, young people, really get by society and by themselves, and by their fears of feeling weak or failing in front of their peers and all of that stuff. Just are so nervous of doing that, of making mistakes. But it's just the best thing in the world when you can do that and just live through it. Yeah.
And you've not got to worry that you won't get paid at the end of it, because you're a student and you won't be a student forever.
Yeah, completely. And it's been definitely that process. I'm still very much in that at the moment. I think as somebody who definitely came into the undergrad a very good student, took it very seriously. I'm here to work. I'm here because I've already done the work, and I'm here, and every performance is gonna be like a real like effort, and it's gonna be, and all my tutors are gonna be like, know everything, and everything is just gonna be amazing because I know how to study. And it got to a point in my undergrad where that just wasn't really, it's just not enough anymore, like to just be a really good student. You have to want music to be a part of your life. And I was kind of getting there in my undergrad near the end. And then when we went into lockdown, music had this whole other layer of meaning. I've been speaking with my peers about it recently, about how before lockdown, I definitely prioritized my singing and work, and being in this career, and it being like I must give everything, and my relationships with my family, and my partner and my friends and all of these things were definitely important to me, but the work comes first. And then when I went into lockdown, it happened quite gradually, but by the end it was like in the mornings I need to listen to music and sing a bit, so that when I finish, I'm a really lovely daughter, sister, friend, because that's my time to just like be with myself. And I don't think I've cried over music so much as I did in lockdown. Like performances were affecting me, especially near the end. There were particular recordings I was having to avoid when preparing for my end of year recital, because I was just like a blubbering mess. But when I did do that, when I lived through that, then even if it's just for 2 hours, or even if it's like 10 minutes where I just listen to something that makes me cry and it's my moment, then suddenly I want to call my mum and be like, hey, how's life, you know, whatever, and I'm ready to like listen to my partner talk about something, or like go out and do something with like, you know, outside obviously, but you know, live my life as a good person. And I want to maintain that the other way around now that I've moved back to London and I'm like here ready to perform again. I hope that no matter how busy the career ends up being, once we go back on track, that this generation of performers and people working in the arts in every way can prioritize like how that affects the way they are a good person, rather than being a good person in a convoluted way because you feel like you've earned it from the work. It's not that at all. Yeah.
Gosh, I mean, that's such an amazing amount of what you've just said, and like a lot of it really resonates with me. I think as people who work in the arts, or as performers, or as arts managers, we tend to really throw ourselves into it, and it is a huge labour of love. I think that, you know, learning to find where that balance is as against family and other things is a huge journey for everyone. And it took me until I had a child to really kind of attempt to balance that out a bit more. So it definitely sounds as though, almost as though the musical side of things is almost like therapeutic for all the other stuff that's going on. And I wanted to ask, I've written down like 10 questions when I'm talking, I'm trying to choose the best one. To come back a bit to when you were talking about students and how they treat university, this reminded me of a question that I kind of deal with a lot in my line of work when I'm working with artists or talking to them about managing them or about their strategy for their careers, which is their own identity as artists. And this can definitely also be true of arts professionals, not necessarily just performers. But I feel as though there's this sort of, you know, as a young person, like pre-uni, you're definitely usually under the tutelage of someone and kind of like being taught in a mould. And then at some point when you're post-uni and you have a career, you're expected to be entirely your own artist and have your own identity, or, you know, you're as a music practitioner or as a music manager, your own kind of views and values and so on. I think more and more. And I was wondering, question to each of you, in your experience, did you see, as you were going through your studies, when do people develop that, do you think, in your experience? Maybe Rebecca, you know, do people, have you seen yourself and your peers, you know, going through that transition of being, you know, the student who is learning from those with all of the expertise to becoming their own artist?
Yeah. Yes, is the answer. It happens, I think it does happen to everyone completely differently for different reasons, based on what your upbringing is and what your baggage is as a performer, and what is it that you bring with you that stops you from being a free and truthful performer. So it happens to everybody differently. And as a result, it happens at different times. But certainly when you do an undergraduate of 4 years with the same 16 people, you do observe inevitably those transitions in a way that affects, especially with singing. I can't speak for other instruments, but with singing, even the way they produce sound. And it's definitely happened with me a lot of times. I think the COVID lockdown has fast-tracked that process for most of my colleagues. Because we, as I say, have been in the same institution for this particular amount of time with the same roughly group of people and done a lot of things together. And then going into lockdown, that was taken away. As much as we had Zoom and as much as we had like all of the stuff happening, there was a takeaway. And as I say, music became much more internal in the way that you're relating to it. So, you know, that's a very different process, and that relies on that being successful, you having a practice that day where you're at peace with that practice, and you listening to music that day, or you enjoying your craft that day, is completely dependent on your relationship with it. Whereas before, you could be in a room with lots of people and there's like distraction and layers and like environment that dictates your relationship with it more. So I think that's why the COVID lockdown fast tracked it for all of us, because we came out of it with like, well, my special moments of music were actually me alone doing it. I found personally that there came a point on my undergraduate, I would say kind of 2/3 of the way through, where I just hit a massive wall. I think emotionally, I really got to a point where I felt, I don't know how to explain this, but just that I didn't have my own thoughts anymore. There's a lot of feedback that happens when you're in a conservatoire, good and bad, from people also going through that same journey. So it's a really weird process of like hearing feedback. And even if you don't feel it in the moment, it starts to sit with you that people think about you. And that's a really strange thing as a young person of 19, 20 years old, that I would have been 20 around the time when I felt this really extremely, to have like just left home and kind of be knowing that everyone's having thoughts about the way that you are. So that's really extreme. But one thing that coming back, I've really noticed in myself and in the other people around me, is that we're all ready, and we don't know how we're gonna do it, but so many of us are now ready to find something from the time we've had alone that makes us have an identity beyond studying, and there's less fret around being the perfect student, but more a deep look at what it is that makes us artists. And one thing that I do really hope happens coming out of COVID-19 lockdown is that classical music and classical singing just changes the structures and the hierarchy around the way it works, because so many of us felt that strain that we had to end up doing a particular set of steps and be the best and be perfect to achieve the goal. And I don't think any of us feel that's true anymore. I don't think any of us feel that that's a truth in the world because of the lockdown. And I think we're ready, all of us are ready to be portfolio musicians and like have a lot of things about us that aren't just like, I make nice sounds and I make the nicest sound in the room and that's why I'm here. There's more than that. So that was really long-winded. Sorry. But yeah, it's such a complicated question with singers as well, because it's our bodies that produce the sound. So there's this whole other layer of like, anytime you're in a bad place, it's so obvious. Like badly obvious.
It's completely all related and interrelated, isn't it? Well, yeah, I think I think you're absolutely right, and I'm glad to hear that. It's definitely, I completely agree with you about hoping that things about the industry change as a result of this. I think that the lockdown has shown how fragile the industry is actually, and how difficult it can be to be a person working in the industry. What are your thoughts on this, Anna?
I think doing an like academic music degree, I think it's almost an extension of A levels in lots of ways. And so every time you do something, you're not doing it for yourself, and you're not really doing it for an audience. You're doing it for the tutors, the lecturers, for an examiner. So you're molding what you want to do into something that is going to please the person who's marking it. And so I think even though maybe towards final year, when you're doing individual projects, you start to get some artistic identity, I don't think that can really happen in an academic music degree. I don't think that fully happens until you finish studying, because that's when you're not bound by those things. Although you are now bound by new things, you're bound by getting paid for something. So if you do something totally off the wall that no one wants to listen to, you might not get any money. But I think certainly not that uni is a bad thing and that it's restrictive, that you can't be your own artist, but you're definitely kind of channeled into certain ways of doing things, and you can be creative within that, but you can't necessarily have your full identity until you get beyond that.
Yeah, I agree with that. That makes a lot of sense. It's tricky when you're doing things that are going to be examined or commented on by lecturers or professors or whatever, because and I have I used to work for the uni, so I do have sympathy for this from the other side as well. but you sort of either have to conform to what they think is a good way of doing things, or you have to really go down your own path and be radical. But if you do that, you risk being misunderstood, I think. And it really depends. I mean, I think at Hull we're lucky to have such open-minded lecturers. I don't know if that's your experience, but it was certainly mine.
No, absolutely, yeah.
I felt that it was supportive in that way. I'm not sure that other institutions that I've been aware of have been the same. Yeah, I feel like now I've opened a can of worms I want to keep talking about, but I probably need to round it off. Would you like to each take a moment to tell me about what you're up to at the moment, and shamelessly plug anything you would like our listeners to hear about? I'll start with Anna.
Okay, so obviously I'm not a performer, so I don't really have my own things going on at the minute, but I thought I'd plug a few things. Firstly, going back to tips for people who want to get into arts admin, or just do anything really. Like, making the most of uni is so important, but when you're past that, there is still support there. It's not in the traditional ways that you might think of, but for example, for arts administrators, there's this group called Young People in the Arts. So you can sign up. At the minute, you can have Zoom meetings with them, and they organise speakers to come, and they might have a talk on, if you're unemployed, how to get a job in the arts admin side of things. So even once you finish your kind of studying journey, there's always stuff that you can be doing to connect with people, to find out ways of doing things. So yeah, Young People in the Arts, it's a great organisation. It's really cheap to join. I think it's £25 a year, or you can just attend a talk for the odd £2. It's an amazing organisation. And then performance-wise, Britain Symphonia, we've been doing a lot less performing than normal, obviously, since March, but we're getting back to performing, and we're doing a whole variety of things. But one exciting thing, which is coming up on the 18th of November, is a live stream from the Barbican, and it's Britain Symphonia with Shabaka Hutchings, who's a phenomenal clarinetist, saxophonist. He's a jazz, classical, fusion kind of musician, and he is great. And it's going to be awesome to see the way that he interacts with Britain Symphonia. And what I think is really cool about that is that anyone, anywhere can watch it, because it's a live stream. So that's, again, one of the really great things to come out of lockdown, is that you don't have to be where the concert is to enjoy it. And so the final one is New Paths, which Katie has a relationship with as well. New Paths Music was one of the first things that I volunteered at outside of uni. They run a spring festival, and they also do a September festival called Beverley Chamber Music Fest. But they've recently done another lovely thing to come out of lockdown. They've done these postcards, musical postcards, and so they've employed musicians who weren't really getting any work in July, and they've linked the music to a certain place in East Yorkshire. So might be a piece that links to the Humber Bridge or something. And they're for free. They're on YouTube. If you just type in New Paths Music, you'll find them. And I think they're, again, just a really lovely example of something positive to come out of lockdown and show us that there are other ways to work. And some of them are actually preferable.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I really, really love New Path's work, and yeah, the postcards are really gorgeous. Rebecca, tell us about what you're up to.
Yeah, well, obviously it is a weird time still, so it's nothing massively specific, but I can just recommend to everyone to go and check out the Guildhall website, because they've been so consistent about uploading every masterclass and performance. I think the opera Triple Bill is going to be performed in the theatre, but posted, like, it'll be live online or something. I think it might still be up there, I don't know, but the gold medal happened in the beginning of September, and that was insane, because they had like no latency thing, where they had like different people in different rooms, and it was madness. So yeah, they're really trying so hard to maintain connection with their music and with performances. So I would recommend to everyone to go and check that out for sure. And I think for me, performances wise, we're still looking at 2021 in terms of anything that I would want to plug. I don't even know. I don't even know, to be honest. But yeah, Guildhall website is amazing if you're looking for that injection of something.
Thank you so much, both of you, for joining me and for a really, really interesting chat. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening today. To find out what we're up to, do join our mailing list or follow us on social media. And if you'd like to support the podcast by buying me a coffee, you can do that on buymeacoffee.com. Thank you so much. See you next time.